You drove past one of them this week, the lot half empty. The sign still lit, but the windows dark by 8 at night. You told yourself it was just a slow Tuesday. It wasn't. 12 restaurant chains that built the American highway are dying right now, and most of them will not say the word out loud. They are closing in waves. They are filing in silence. And the people who own them already took their money out. I know, because I spent more than 30 years inside this business. I sat in the back rooms. I watched the charts change color before the public ever felt it. And I'm going to count them down for you, from the ones quietly bleeding to the single biggest collapse of them all, the one almost nobody is connecting to a real estate deal signed back in 2014. That last one still makes my stomach turn, so stay with me. Let me start where it's easy to miss, because that's how it always begins. Number 12 is the company behind two names you'd never expect to see on a list like this: Applebee's and IHOP. Together, they sit under one parent called Dine Brands, and on paper they look fine, but I learned a long time ago to stop reading the paper and start counting the doors. Applebee's closed dozens of locations across 2023 and into 2024, and the chain that once ran more than 2,000 restaurants in this country has been shrinking its footprint year after year. IHOP, the place you took your kids at 2 in the morning, has been quietly trimming too. Here's what the public sees: a coupon, a 2 for 25 deal, a bright television ad. Here's what I see: a company leaning on discounts because the customers stopped coming at full price. When a chain this size starts cutting locations in towns it dominated for 40 years, that is not a slow Tuesday. That is the floor moving under the building. And Applebee's is the healthy one on this list. Think about that, because it only gets worse from here. Number 11 is Denny's, and this one hurts me personally, because Denny's was the place that never closed. The diner with the lights on at 3 in the morning when everything else in town was dark. That was the whole promise. Always open, always there. Not anymore. In 2024, Denny's announced it was closing around 150 locations, with about 50 of them shutting their doors by the end of that year, and the rest following after. The company blamed rising minimum wage costs in certain states and underperforming older stores, and some of that is true, but I'll tell you what I saw in numbers like these. When a company closes the stores that have been open for 30 and 40 years, it isn't trimming fat, it's amputating. Those older locations were the ones with paid-off equipment and loyal regulars. If those can't make money anymore, something deeper is broken. Denny's still runs over 1,500 restaurants, so it isn't gone. But the always open diner is now the sometimes open diner, and in a lot of small towns, sometimes turns into never. Therefore, the question isn't whether Denny's survives at the top. It's how many of the towns that depended on it get left behind. And that question is going to follow us all the way to number 1. Number 10 is Outback Steakhouse, and the parent that owns it, a company called Bloomin' Brands. Now, Outback is the place you went for an anniversary when you didn't want to spend steakhouse money, but wanted steakhouse feeling, the bloomin' onion, the bread. For a lot of families, that was the nice night out. In early 2025, Bloomin' Brands announced it was closing 41 restaurants, most of them Outback and Bonefish Grill locations. The stock had fallen hard. Same-store sales were sliding. And the company that also owns Carrabba's and Fleming's was suddenly looking a lot less healthy than the smiling commercials suggested. But here's where my insider red kicks in. And here's where I need you to start paying closer attention. Closing 41 stores doesn't sound catastrophic for a company that size. The number is small. The reason behind it is not. Because when a casual sit-down chain starts closing in the suburbs, it tells you the middle-class customer, the family that used to celebrate at Outback, has quietly stopped showing up. They're cooking at home. They're cutting back. And that customer, the everyday American family with a little money to spend on a Friday night, is the customer every single chain on this list was built to serve. Outback is just the first place where you can see them disappearing. Watch for them again, because they are the ghost haunting this entire countdown. If you want to go deeper on exactly how this collapse is unfolding and what it means for your money, your town, and the economy, most people aren't watching closely enough. I've written about it at length in my books, The Collapse, Dead Weight, and Collapse Cash. They're available in the description below. These aren't cheerful reads, but they are honest ones. And right now, honest is more useful than cheerful. If what I'm telling you in this video is landing, Those books will take you the rest of the way. Now let's get back to the countdown, because the names ahead of us are bigger, the debt is heavier, and the machine gets uglier the closer we get to number 1. Number 9 is Cracker Barrel, and this one is a different kind of danger, because it's a self-inflicted wound. You know the place. The rocking chairs out front. The country store where you bought the old-fashioned candy on the way out. For a certain kind of American, Cracker Barrel wasn't a restaurant. It was a feeling of home off the interstate. In 2025, the company unveiled a rebrand, a new logo, a stripped-down look, and the backlash was instant and brutal. Longtime customers felt like the company was erasing the very thing they loved. The stock took a beating. The story made national news for all the wrong reasons. And the company found itself apologizing and walking pieces of it back. Now, I've watched this movie before, more times than I can count. When a chain that's been around since 1969 suddenly decides it needs to reinvent its entire identity, that decision didn't come from the customers. It came from a boardroom that looked at the same store traffic numbers and panicked. Cracker Barrel had been seeing its core customers age and visit less often. The rebrand was a desperate move to chase someone younger. Therefore, the real story isn't the logo. The real story is that the people who built Cracker Barrel into an institution are slipping away, and the company knows it. That panic, that scramble to become something else, is a symptom. And the disease is the same one taking down everything on this list. Number 8 is Bob Evans, and if you grew up in the Midwest, this name means Sunday morning, the farm-style breakfast, the sausage with the family name on the package in your grocery store. Bob Evans was as American as the fields it was named after. But here's something most people never realized happened. Back in 2017, the company split itself in two. The packaged foods business, the sausage you buy at the supermarket, was sold off to Post Holdings for about $1.5 billion. And the restaurants were sold separately to a private investment group. The brand you trusted got carved into pieces and sold to the highest bidders, and most loyal customers never even knew. Since then, the restaurant count has shrunk. Bob Evans once ran more than 570 restaurants. Today, it operates a few hundred, and locations have quietly vanished across states where the chain was once everywhere. And now I need to stop, because I just used a phrase that changes this entire video. Carved into pieces and sold, because that, right there, is the thing the press releases hide. These chains aren't simply failing because you stopped eating breakfast out. They are being taken apart on purpose by people who make money whether the restaurant lives or dies. I'm going to show you exactly how that machine works, and it gets darker with every name we have left. Number 7 is Buffalo Wild Wings, and this one shows you the trick in plain sight. The sports bar. The wall of televisions, the wings on game day. It looks busy, it looks alive. So how is it in danger? Because in 2017, Buffalo Wild Wings was bought by the company that owns Arby's, a firm called Inspire Brands, in a deal worth around $2.5 billion. And Inspire Brands is backed by a private equity giant named Rourke Capital. When that happens, the restaurant stops being a restaurant. It becomes an asset on a spreadsheet, loaded with debt from the deal that bought it, expected to squeeze out cash to pay back the people who financed the purchase. Buffalo Wild Wings has been closing underperforming corporate locations, even while it opens smaller takeout spots, because the math behind the scenes demands constant cutting. You walk in on a Sunday, and the place is packed, and you think, this chain is thriving. But the health of a restaurant today has almost nothing to do with how full the dining room looks. It has everything to do with how much debt was strapped to its back in a deal you never heard about. And the deals are getting bigger as we climb. So let me show you what happens when one of these chains runs out of room to cut. Number 6 is Boston Market. And this is the one that should scare you, because it shows you the full distance a chain can fall. The rotisserie chicken, the mashed potatoes and gravy, the cornbread. In the late 1990s, Boston Market was a juggernaut, running more than 1,100 restaurants across this country. It was everywhere. It was the easy weeknight dinner, before the easy weeknight dinner had a name. Today, by recent counts, Boston Market is down to a few dozen locations, and some reports put the number even lower. The company has been hit with lawsuits over unpaid bills. It's been hit with vendors walking away. It's been hit with reports of locations losing power and being shut down by health departments. A chain that once fed millions has collapsed to a shadow, and it happened while most of America simply forgot it existed. Here's the lesson I learned watching companies die. They don't fall all at once. They fall slowly, then all at once. Boston Market spent 2 decades changing hands, getting bought and sold, getting loaded up and stripped down, until there was nothing left to take. And the people who passed it around made their money on the way through. The empty buildings were never their problem. They were yours. Therefore, when I tell you the next chains on this list are in danger, understand what danger really means. It means the Boston Market path, from 1100 to almost nothing. And the chains ahead of us were far bigger than Boston Market ever was. Now, I need to stop the countdown for a minute, because this is the part that's actually about you. You've been listening to me name chains and numbers, and maybe part of you is thinking, I don't eat at most of these places, so what does it matter to me? Let me tell you exactly what it matters, because this is where it lands in your life, not in some boardroom. Start with your town. Every one of these restaurants sits on a piece of commercial real estate, usually in a shopping center or off a busy road. When it closes, that building goes dark, and a dark anchor building pulls down everything around it. The nail salon next door loses foot traffic. The little pizza place in the same plaza loses its lunch crowd. The property value of that whole corner drops. I have watched a single chain closure turn a healthy shopping center into a ghost strip in under 2 years. If one of these went dark near you, you're not just losing a place to eat. You're watching the first domino of your own neighborhood's decline. Now think about the jobs. A single sit-down restaurant employs 40, 50, sometimes 60 people. Cooks, servers, dishwashers, the teenager working their first job, the single mother working the dinner shift, the recent immigrant in the kitchen. When the chain closes 150 locations, like Denny's did, that's thousands of working people, in towns that often don't have another job waiting. These weren't fancy careers. They were the jobs that held families together between the bigger things, and they vanish in a single press release on a Friday, after the lunch shift, so it doesn't make the evening news. Now think about your wallet, because this is the part nobody connects. When these chains close locations and cut back, the survivors raise prices. Less competition means the places still standing don't have to fight for you anymore. You've felt it already. The same meal that cost you $40 for the family a few years ago now runs you $60 or $70. That's not just inflation on the food. That's the collapse of the competition that used to keep prices honest. Every chain that dies makes the ones left standing a little more expensive and a little less interested in keeping you happy. And here's the part that should really sit with you. The money didn't disappear. When these companies got bought and sold and loaded with debt, somebody got rich. The investment firms collected their fees, the executives collected their bonuses and their stock. The real estate got sold off for cash that went into someone's pocket. The only people left holding the loss are the workers who lost the job, the town that lost the anchor, and you, paying more for less at whatever's still open. That is the trade that's been happening to this country for 30 years, quietly, one chain at a time. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So let me show you the biggest examples of it, because the top 5 are where the money got truly enormous. Number 5 is Hooters. And yes, I know what you're thinking, but stay with me, because the numbers are deadly serious. In March of 2025, Hooters of America filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The chain that defined a certain era of American casual dining, with hundreds of locations at its peak, had buckled under a debt load reported to be around $376 million. $376 million for a wings and beer chain. Now ask yourself the question I always ask. How does a restaurant that sells $10 plates of wings end up owing nearly $400 million? You don't rack up that kind of debt selling food. You rack up that kind of debt when investment firms buy and sell the company, borrowing against it each time, piling loans onto the brand to finance their own deals. Hooters had been passed between private equity owners, and each pass left it heavier. By the time it filed, the wings were never the problem. The debt was. The company announced it was trying to sell its corporate-owned locations to a group of franchisees, a desperate move to survive. And maybe it does survive in some smaller form, but the lesson is the same one climbing through this whole list. Therefore, as we go higher, the debt gets bigger, the names get more famous, and the money that got pulled out gets harder to believe. Number 4 is TGI Fridays. And this is where my heart genuinely sinks, because Fridays was the original. Before there was an Applebee's or a Chili's in every suburb, TGI Fridays invented the whole idea of the fun, loud, American casual restaurant. The flair on the suspenders, the potato skins, the place where the modern happy hour was practically born. In November of 2024, TGI Fridays filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. At its peak, the chain ran more than 600 locations in the United States. By the time of the filing, the American footprint had collapsed to a fraction of that, and it kept closing more. Dozens of restaurants shut down in a matter of months. A chain that once defined a night out in America was suddenly fighting just to keep the lights on in the locations it had left. And here's the insider truth about Fridays. It had been owned for years by private investment groups. It went through ownership changes, a failed attempt to go public through a merger, mountains of debt. The brand that taught America how to go out for a casual dinner was financially gutted long before the public ever saw an empty parking lot. By the time you noticed your local Fridays was gone, the decisions that killed it were a decade old. The collapse you can see is always years behind the collapse you can't. Remember that, because it's the key to understanding number 1. Number 3 is Red Lobster, and I'm putting it here, just below the top, because I want you to feel how big this is before I tell you the whole story. The seafood place for landlocked America, the Cheddar Bay Biscuits. The lobster you couldn't get anywhere else in your town. For millions of families, Red Lobster was the special occasion, the graduation dinner, the Mother's Day brunch. On May 19th of 2024, Red Lobster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The chain that once ran more than 700 restaurants began closing dozens upon dozens of locations, with reports of more than 90 closing in the lead up to and during the filing. Equipment from shuttered restaurants got auctioned off online. Entire buildings went dark across the country in a single season. The story everyone heard was the endless shrimp promotion, the all-you-can-eat shrimp deal that the company offered for around $20, that customers ate so aggressively, the company reported a loss of roughly $11 million tied to it. And the press loved that story. Greedy customers ate the chain to death. It was funny. It was simple. It made for great headlines. But it was a lie of omission, and I'm about to tell you the part they buried. Because the shrimp didn't kill Red Lobster, the shrimp was a rounding error next to what actually happened. And what actually happened is, number 1. Number 2, before I get there, is the chain that proves the pattern is everywhere. And that's the broader story of Joe's Crab Shack and its parent collapse. Joe's Crab Shack, the bucket of seafood beach-themed chain, was owned by a company that went through bankruptcy, and locations vanished by the dozens. At its peak, it ran well over 100 restaurants. After its parent company's financial collapse, the count was slashed dramatically, with many locations closing overnight, sometimes locking the doors with no warning to the workers who showed up for their shift. I include it because I need you to understand this is not bad luck striking 1 or 2 unlucky brands. This is a system. The same financial machine, the buying and the debt and the stripping, ran through Joe's Crab Shack, exactly the way it ran through every name on this list. And now you're ready for the one at the top, because it's the clearest, cleanest, most outrageous example of that machine I have ever seen. Number 1 is Red Lobster, and now I'm going to tell you what really happened. The part that lives in the financial filings and not in the funny headlines. Go back to 2014. Red Lobster was sold by its longtime parent for around $2.1 billion to a private equity firm called Golden Gate Capital. And here is the move. The move that, once you understand it, you will start seeing behind half the collapses in this country. To help pay for that purchase, Red Lobster's own real estate, the actual land and buildings under hundreds of its restaurants, was sold off in a deal worth roughly $1.5 billion to a real estate company. It's called a sale-leaseback. The new owners sold the ground out from under the restaurants, took the cash, and then forced Red Lobster to rent back the very buildings it used to own. Think about what that means. Overnight, a company that owned its own homes became a renter, paying rent forever on land it had owned for decades. The cash from selling that real estate didn't go into better food or better workers. It went into financing the buyout. The people who did the deal got their money out almost immediately, and Red Lobster was left carrying enormous new rent payments, year after year, in good times and bad, with no way to ever stop. Now layer on what came next. A major seafood supplier, a company called Thai Union Group, became a big investor and eventually took a controlling stake. And critics later argued, in the bankruptcy proceedings themselves, that the supplier's influence shaped purchasing decisions in ways that served the supplier. The endless shrimp deal that the headlines blamed everything on? It happened while that supplier sat at the table. So the shrimp story wasn't just incomplete. It was the perfect distraction. Blame the all-you-can-eat customers. Don't mention the $1.5 billion of real estate that got stripped out a decade earlier, the rent that strangled the company every single month after. By the time Red Lobster filed in May of 2024, it was drowning, not in shrimp, but in lease payments and debt that traced straight back to that 2014 deal. The company itself, in its bankruptcy filing, pointed to its crushing lease obligations as a core reason it could not survive. A management firm called Fortress Investment Group ended up leading the path forward. And the families who showed up for one last Cheddar Bay biscuit found auction signs in dark windows, never knowing that the restaurant's fate had been sealed 10 years earlier in a room they were never allowed inside. That's the whole game, laid bare. Buy the company with borrowed money. Sell off the real estate it owned for cash. Take your money out fast. Leave the business renting its own buildings forever, buried under debt, until it collapses. And when it finally dies, blame the customers for eating too much shrimp. The money was made on the way in. The loss was handed to everyone else on the way out. The workers, the towns, the families. I spent more than 30 years in this business, and I'll be honest with you. For a long time, I told myself it wasn't really this cynical. I sat in those meetings, and I believed the people at the top still cared about keeping the lights on for the next 40 years. I was wrong. Somewhere along the way, the restaurant stopped being the point. The restaurant became the thing you take apart to get at what it owns. And once I finally understood that, I couldn't look at an empty parking lot the same way again. So the next time you drive past one of these places with the lights off, I want you to understand what you're actually looking at. You're not looking at a business that failed because the food got bad or because you stopped caring. You're looking at the end of a deal that somebody won years ago, in a room with no windows, while you were still ordering dessert. You always sensed something didn't add up. The chains you grew up with don't just vanish for no reason. And the official story never quite explained the empty lots. You were right to trust that feeling. You're the kind of person who knows when the good news on the surface is hiding something underneath. And now, you know exactly what it was hiding. So tell me this, which one of these hit you the hardest? Was it the Red Lobster where your family marked the big occasions? Was it the Denny's that was always open when you needed it at 2 in the morning? Or was it the Boston market that just quietly disappeared from your town one year and never came back? Write it in the comments and tell me which one you watched die, because I read them, and I think you'll be stunned how many people are grieving the exact same place you are. And if you want the truth about where this is really headed, not the press release version, stay with me here. There are people who want to understand what's actually happening to the country they remember, and that's who this is for. Because the next chain I'm tracking isn't a restaurant at all. It's a name you've trusted your whole life, sitting on a debt load that mirrors Red Lobster's almost exactly, and the same kind of deal is already in motion. I'll show you that one next. Don't look away now. You finally know what to look for. I spent 30 years inside this business, and I held a lot back tonight. So if you're still with me, come join me inside the circle, where I pick up right where I stopped and go deeper. You can ask me your own questions, and I answer you myself. You'd belong among thousands of folks just like you. Just point your phone's camera at the code on screen, and you can cancel anytime. If you want to keep up with which chains are really struggling, stay right here and subscribe. There's plenty more like this waiting for you, and more is coming soon.